Welcome to Crocodile MTG, your home of competitive, constructed play in the modern, standard, and legacy formats. Today's video was brought to you by all our wonderful sponsors, affiliates, and patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the Crocodile MTG channel, and we hope you enjoy today's video. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jordan with Crocodile MTG, here bringing you another Magic the Gathering video. Today we're going to be taking another deep dive into Pioneer with Izzet Ensoul. Izzet Ensoul is actually not my deck list. This deck list came from Ross Merriam, who is a grinder on the SCG tour. Ross also does SCG live on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he is also a podcaster. He teamed with Tan and Grace to create the Pioneer Cast podcast, so go check them out on your favorite podcasting device. Thank you so much, Ross, for making this list. This is super powerful, super aggressive, and super fun. We're going to take a deep dive into it. It plays very similar to Affinity in Modern, and again, this deck is super well positioned in this format right now, and we're going to take it for a ride and try it out. So to go over the deck a little bit, your key cards are Ensoul Artifact here, Ghostfire Blade, and Skilled Animator. We also have powerful cards like Smuggler's Copter. So what Ensoul Artifact and Skilled Animator do is create one of your artifacts into a 5/5 base power creature. Now pairing that, we have a bunch of 1 mana and 2 mana powerful creatures, or X mana powerful creatures that are artifacts. And what that does is it keeps all their abilities, but it creates a 5/5 base power and toughness. So, for example, if we're playing Hope of Ghirapur, Hope of Ghirapur is a flying creature. It's legendary. It's a Thopter. It also has the ability of sacrifice it until end of your next turn. Target player who was dealt combat damage by Hope of Ghirapur cannot cast non-creature spells until your next turn. So, with that said, if you play Hope of Ghirapur on turn 1 and play an Ensoul Artifact on turn 2, Hope of Ghirapur becomes a 5/5 flyer for essentially 3 mana, because you invest the 1 mana in Hope of Ghirapur and then 2 mana in the Ensoul Artifact, and essentially you just have a 5/5 flyer on turn 2, which I do not know of many decks that can actually do that, and that's super powerful, especially in Pioneer, that has, you know, tap lands, fetch land, or no fetch lands, and has a slower mana base and kind of a slower creature base. Now, with something like Ginger Brew is a card out of Throne of Eldraine. It has haste and also has the ability of paying 1, and Ginger Brew can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste. Ginger Brew can come down on turn 1, swing in for 1. Turn 2, you can play Ensoul Artifact, and Ginger Brew becomes a 5/5 haster with the also text of Ginger Brew can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste if you pay 1. So essentially on turn 2, you can be swinging in with a 5/5, and for the rest of the game, you can be paying 1 and making an unblockable 5/5. Now, you also have cards in this deck, I apologize, similar to the Ginger Brew, we have Beau Mac Courier here. Now, the difference between Beau Mac Courier and Ginger Brew, well, there's a lot of difference. But Beau Mac Courier is in this deck because even though it can become a 5/5 and haster and is super aggressive, it also has the ability, whenever it attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. This is a card out of Kaladesh. You may pay 1 red and discard your hand, and then sacrifice Beau Mac Courier, and put all cards exiled with Beau Mac Courier in its owner's hand. So essentially, if you play Beau Mac on turn 1 and swing, you put a card under Beau Mac Courier face down. You don't know what that card is. Turn 2, you can play something like Ensoul Artifact on Beau Mac Courier. Now it's a base power 5/5 swinging in every turn that accumulates cards underneath Beau Mac Courier pretty quickly. And since we're such a low to the ground deck, if we're throwing a bunch of cards under Beau Mac Courier, then eventually our hand is going to be kind of crappy with 1 or 2 cards in it, or we won't have a hand at all. Later in the game, if our opponent tries to kill Beau Mac Courier, we can sacrifice and get all those cards and refill our hand. So that's a super powerful ability if you're familiar with the play patterns of Kaladesh. Standard, that was one of the key cards in some of the red decks. because you're playing out your hand so quickly. You want to be able to replenish that. Now, another key boost spell in this deck is Ghostfire Blade. Ghostfire Blade is a 1-mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and it has an equip cost of 3, but if you're trying to equip a colorless creature, then you can just pay 1 for it, because it has a deduction of 2 if you're equipping a colorless creature. So with that said, all our artifacts are colorless creatures. Actually, does that... Okay, Ensoul Artifact does not make it a blue creature. I was worried about that for a second. Yeah, Ghostfire Blade can basically equip any of your artifact creatures, and with that, it gets a +2/+2 boost for essentially 2 mana if you're playing the Ghostfire Blade for 1 mana, and then you pay the 1 for the equip cost. So essentially, you can have a 7/7 on turn 3, you can have a 3/3 on turn 2, or you can play it later in the game and just constantly pump up your artifact creatures, which is super powerful. You almost never don't have a 3/3 in your deck. Also in this deck, we have cards like Phyrexian Revoker and Smuggler's Copter. Phyrexian Revokers to take care of any creatures or planeswalkers that have activated abilities that are causing you problems. So this takes care of something like Teferi, stops it from bouncing your artifacts. Takes care of Oko, stops it from turning him into Elks, etc., etc. Smuggler's Copter's in here. Smuggler's Copter is a super powerful vehicle out of Kaladesh as well. Whenever it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. It has a crew cost of 1, so it's super easy to crew Smuggler's Copter, and it's a 3/3 flyer. One neat thing about Smuggler's Copter as well, if you play it on turn 2 and play something like Skilled Animator, which has the Ensoul Artifact ability, or if you play Ensoul Artifact on Smuggler's Copter, it becomes a 5/5 flying vehicle, but you never have to actually crew it. It's just a 5/5 flyer with base power and toughness, and also it can block if it doesn't attack the turn. But most of the time you're going to be attacking with this deck. You don't block all that often. So we also have Pia and Kieran Nalar. Pia has the ability of pay 1, sacrifice an artifact. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. It also enters the battlefield with a 1/1 Thopter. So Pia you can play on like turn 4. You can use the 1 extra mana and sacrifice an artifact and make it so something like your opponent's Kalitas or Siege Rhino or something can't block. And then you also have the ability to pay 1 in a red, and target artifact creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It's a great way to get in those last couple points of damage. We also have Skilled Animator, like I talked about before. When it enters the battlefield, an artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 5/5 as long as Skilled Animator remains on the battlefield. So this is another way to pump and use the Ensoul Artifact effect on one of your artifact creatures here. Now, one of the best creatures in this deck is actually Stone Coil Serpent. Stone Coil Serpent is extremely well positioned in this format. It is a card out of Throne of Eldraine. It has pay X. It enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. It has Reach, which is that's fine ability. It has Trample, which is super powerful. And the most powerful ability is actually it has Protection from Multicolor. So I feel like this is a very underrated card. Because this card has Protection from Multicolor, it stops things like Oko, it stops things like Teferi Time Raveler, it stops things like Assassin's Trophy, and also stops things like Abrupt Decay from being able to target it and kill it. So this is a super versatile card against a lot of the removal in the format. And pairing it with something like Ensoul Artifact. So if you play Stone Coil Serpent, say for like a 4/4, so you pay 4 mana into it, make it a 4/4, then you play Ensoul Artifact on Stone Coil Serpent. I believe the interaction is it becomes base power 5/5, but it keeps the +1/+1 counters, and suddenly you have a 9/9 Trampler. And that is super powerful in this format. Almost nothing is going to be able to deal with that. And the fact that it has Protection from Multicolor makes a lot of the cards that are being played right now, first of all, it's unblockable. Like multicolored creatures cannot block it. And has Trample, so your little aggressive like 1/2s in like mono red and things like that. they're not going to be able to do anything about it. And it's just a super powerful card, and 1 or 2 hits with Stone Coil Serpent with Ensoul Artifact or Skilled Animator, like your opponent is just not going to be able to do anything. So this is a super powerful card. Our mana base is pretty straightforward. We have Darksteel Citadel just as an artifact booster. We have just a couple Throne of Eldraine basic lands here, a mountain and a island. We have Mutavault. Mutavault is an artifact because it's one of the creature types. So it's just a way to get in the last couple points of damage through your lands. We have Shivan Reef just as a... it's a pain land. It deals 1 damage to you. But it's really not that much, especially since so many of our cards are colorless anyhow. It's just mainly just there to help with mana fixing. Spire of Industry is a card out of Kaladesh. This is another card that can help with mana fixing. You can pay a colorless, or you can pay 1 life and add 1 mana of any color. Activate this ability only if you control an artifact. So it's very easy to turn this card on, since so many of your cards are based around artifacts. And then we have our Spire Bluff Canal, because we are an aggressive deck, and this is a great early game card. And we have 1 Steam Vent. Again, mana fixing, but we don't want a bunch of shock lands because we just don't need them. The shock lands are actually probably one of the worst lands in Pioneer. I know they're like the best lands because you can fetch them out of your deck in Modern, but you really don't need them that often in Pioneer. And they just deal 2 damage to you, which is actually worse, especially against aggressive decks. In our sideboard, we have cards like Stubborn Denial here. Stubborn Denial is a great card if you're playing a control or a heavy removal matchup. Getting an Ensoul Artifact on a creature early makes Stubborn Denial just a 1 mana negate the rest of the game. We have Electricity against a bunch of go wide strategies. So if we're playing against something like Goblins, we can just pay 2, overload it, and deal 1 damage to each creature you don't control. It's great against our deck as well. It's great for our deck as well because it's deal 1 damage to each opponent's creatures. So it does not deal damage to our creatures, especially with all our 1 power toughness creatures here. We have Grafdigger's Cage. So any artifact decks, any decks that are trying to fetch things out of their deck, or also any Reanimator deck style decks, it's just Grafdigger's Cage just shuts them down, plain and simple. It's also an artifact, which we can actually Ensoul Artifact and be swinging with a 5/5 Grafdigger's Cage, which holds the Grafdigger's Cage ability. We have Fry against, again, removal spells or pesky blue-white creatures. We have a Braid simply for the versatility of it. Deal 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. We have Disdainful Stroke against anything that either goes late game, or anything that's playing super large creatures or creatures with X in their power and toughness. We just want to be able to keep anything after 4 mana pretty much away from our deck because our deck is so aggressive. And last but not least, we have Hangerback Walker. Hangerback Walker is a card out of Magic Origins. It's pay X into it, and it enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. Whenever it dies, create X Thopters, where X is equal to the number of 1/1 counters on Hangerback Walker. So this is a super good card against decks that are playing like Assassin's Trophy and things, because it just creates a massive amount of Thopters when it dies, and we get a land, so that's super powerful. You can also pay 1 to put another 1/1 counter on Hangerback Walker. So again, anything like blue-white control or black-green, which has a lot of removal, we want to bring Hangerback Walker in for. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. That was Izzet Ensoul. We're going to jump into some matches, so stay tuned for that. And thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Please go hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed today's video. For your custom playmats, mousepads, and more, head over to Inked Gaming. Use promo code crocodilemtg10 to receive 10% off your order. Today's video was brought to you by all our wonderful sponsors, affiliates, and patrons.